All right, we are recording. All right, thank you for doing this for me, man.
Yeah, no worries.
So let's start off real quick. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little tired today. I was up late last night working,
So,
so
working
it's kind of late.
working on music.
Yeah.
Oh wow, all right. And I guess let's start off with more of a lightweight question. This is kind of inspired from a friend of mine. I think he asked you about this in the Reddit AMA you did, but it's kind of different. So, how much has Pavement impacted your life?
Pavement.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that like of the four dudes in the band, like Dave and Brian are definitely like the heads for sure. I think Pavement actually was just I'd say kind of maybe one of the biggest impacts for me was just that it was, I think, one of the bands that sort of brought like the three of us, like me, Dave, and Brian together. It's one of like the earliest kind of like musical exchanges I remember having with them. Like them, I think it was, I guess it must have been like an early release of Wowie Zowie. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That they actually had like somehow gotten on like cassette. I mean, this was like pre-internet days, but I think they had like sort of like an advanced copy of it somehow. And they were listening to it like in one of the common areas and in the high school we went to, and I think it just kind of like started that exchange. But yeah, I mean, those first like four records and singles and stuff were definitely like, yeah, I mean, they're an amazing band. It's like, yeah, I don't know what to say other than just, yeah.
So let's give.
I mean, I think like they represented like sort of one of like the best versions at that time. I mean, it must have been, I guess, kind of like around 16 when I first kind of heard them, and prior to that, like most of the music I'd listened to had been, just really what was like on the radio, and like stuff I'd gotten like out of my dad's collection. So it was like a lot of like classic rock, and then sort of just like the alternative rock of the day, and maybe I'd started to, like maybe that first like Beck single had come out or something. And that kind of had like a certain like DIY kind of aesthetic to it. But I think it was like probably like hanging out with Dave and Brian and some other friends that I had in high school that started introducing me to stuff like Pavement or like early Palace stuff or the Pavement stuff just really represented this kind of like this like yeah, just like the possibility of really like just doing it yourself and like having this sort of aesthetic that was like really pleasing and felt really like personal and original. But at least initially, like, they didn't have like a polishedness to it that made it just felt really accessible. And I think it just kind of like expanded, it was just an early band that kind of expanded my sense of like what was really possible with making music. So yeah, they just kind of like grouped in, I guess, with like a bunch of stuff that I kind of was exposed to around that time. It just really impacted like the direction of what I was listening to. Really like changed kind of like where my head was at with music.
Mm-hmm. That was kind of like supposed to be a little bit of a joke question, but you went like really in depth in that. But it was really interesting and nice.
What would have been like the joke answer?
I mean, again, like my friend, he's really obsessed with Pavement, and like he always like in the AMAs he always asks, "What's your favorite Pavement song?" So I was like, "Hey, let's see what Deakin thinks of Pavement." Just kind of as like a little like an icebreaker, and it's like, oh, he gave like a really like nice and in-depth answer.
No, I mean they were huge, man. I mean, hearing Son and Janet the first time, hearing Westing, like those early singles collections is, yeah. I mean, it blew my mind. So yeah, definitely. Anyway, but yeah.
I guess that kind of leads into my next question of, where you guys kind of, grew up, on like Pavement, and that really impacted you. And, I guess sort of what was your beginnings in the music industry for you, I guess with either Animal Collective or just sort of as like a solo artist, well, maybe not as a solo artist, because, you really got your start with, Animal Collective, I guess, when it came to like releasing records and getting into the industry. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the industry, it's like such a weird way to put it. I mean, I guess like the first stuff that we did was, I mean, yeah, it was like a slow progression. I mean, the first stuff was literally just, this obviously wasn't like part of like the industry, but it was like a sense of like being able to make music and distribute it. Noah and I like recorded a lot, like starting around the age of like 13, I guess. He got a cassette 8-track, and that became kind of like a weekend hobby for both of us to like get together and work on jams, or he would do stuff alone or I would do stuff alone, and we started getting in the habit of making cassette tapes and like doing all the artwork ourselves, like going to Kinko's and Xeroxing a bunch of stuff and like making like little, you know, inserts for like cassettes and dubbing them and like handing them out to friends and stuff. And that kind of, I think that kind of like energy around feeling like there was, I mean, you know, to say there was a market for it is really silly, but it was just like, you know, friends are just like kind of a, you know, a very small but like significant kind of group of people that you're like, oh, if I make this and give it to this person, like it's going to matter to them, and they're going to, you know, tell somebody else or whatever. So that was cool. I mean, that definitely was no, you know, that wasn't like industry stuff. And then I guess when we were, Noah and I are 1 year older than Dave and Brian, and so we graduated high school a year early, and we took a year off before we went to college. So we stayed in Baltimore and got some recording gear and started recording a bunch of music a little bit more seriously. And I guess out of that year, we just people we'd met through Baltimore. There was this guy, Jeremy Devine, he's still around. He runs a label called Temporary Residence. And we kind of knew that he had some experience. I mean, he was already running a label at that point, and we kind of had this idea that we could like self-release a CD. So I basically helped Noah put together what ended up becoming like the first Panda Bear release. Although I guess I kind of get the sense that people kind of know about it. I don't know how many people have really heard it. I mean, definitely like very much predates Animal Collective in a lot of ways. But that was like kind of the first attempt to like properly kind of like mass produce, but like on our own. Like I think we got like, might even have been as many as like 500 CDs, and we like got, like this sort of like pre-made cardboard packaging that, was recommended by some people, and like silk screened all the covers and kind of like, made like an insert with all of the information about where it was recorded and blah, blah, blah. And actually kind of like tried to get it, on consignment, like sold in some shops here and there. We started our own record label that we called Soccer Star Records. So that was kind of like the beginning of like feeling this sort of self-empowered sense that, you could make something and get it out in the world. And, the impact was like relatively low, but it was Chris. Jeremy Devine at the Temporary Residence, and he was actually really connected to the Secretly Canadian guys. And they were also really amazing. I mean, I was like an 18-year-old kid, and, Jeremy got those guys to like get on the phone with me, and like, I think it was either, Chris, or it might have been, I'm trying to remember now who it was, but one of those guys like literally spent like an hour and a half on the phone with me, like having sent me a list of like all the sort of like publications, and zines and music mags like around the country, or in North America, like including Canada, and sort of was just like, yeah, you should send this to these guys, like don't worry about these guys, like skip the next 5, those guys you should definitely send to. And so, I was like sending around copies of that first record Noah did to like, crazy zines like all over the country, and Spin and anybody I could think of to try to get, with some suggestions. So that was kind of the beginning of, I think, actually feeling like it's something you could do, and that led to starting like the label that put out the, the first, I guess we didn't call Animal Collective yet, but the Aviator Panda Bear record, the Spirit They're Gone record, that was self-released too, and that was a label that we ran ourselves called Animal, which is, I guess, sort of like the origin of Animal Collective, was that record label. And so we initially thought of the whole thing as something that we would kind of be able to build from the ground up on our own with our own record label. And we had, decent success. I mean, that release was kind of the beginning of it. At that point, Noah and Dave were working other music, and I think we got that CD sold at Other Music and a bunch of stores around the country, and like it got some like decent reviews here and there. And so that that was kind of the beginning of it, I guess. I don't know if that, yeah.
And now I think you guys I guess you have your own. I think you had Paw Tracks, and now you have My Animal House, right? Or My Animal Home.
So yeah, Paw Tracks is actually right now kind of on maybe a semi-permanent kind of hiatus, but yeah, we have a it's kind of like in some ways a smaller situation than what Paw Tracks was. My Animal Home, which is basically just kind of like there's a distribution company called ADA, that's sort of one of the larger independent distributors around, and they basically have kind of given us a situation where with very little sort of like, there's no sort of like label sort of services, but like we can print something up and basically just get it distributed through ADA, and then any sort of like services we want on top of that are things that we, would have to pay for if we wanted to like hire, someone to push it like from a press perspective or, radio or any of that kind of stuff. We would have to handle it ourselves or it would be an additional service through ADA. But so we kind of have those multiple situations. And Pawtrax was a dream for sure. I mean, Pawtrax sort of was what I think we thought Animal would be. It just was we couldn't like keep Animal afloat. I mean, we were just young dudes in New York, and pretty much any money that we earned went into rent, and if we had anything extra, it was like, usually ended up being enough to like fix an amp or get new tires in the van or something. So we weren't making enough money to be able to sustain it. But Pawtrax kind of became that thing that I think we originally wanted Animal to be, which was just this place where we could kind of put out, anything we wanted to, a side project or otherwise, and start to kind of, pick up on some other people here and there. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I noticed on Spotify, like almost all the old Animal Collective albums are now under that. So I assume you guys got the rights back to those old albums.
Yeah, we're so like as rights revert from labels that whether Pawtrax or Fat Cat that they've been on in the past. As we get them back, we're shuffling them over to be in My Animal Home, because it's releases that old at this point don't really need a whole lot of work really from a label anymore. It's kind of like all the work that really need to be done. It's more just about keeping them in print and keeping them distributed, and so it's a pretty minimal situation. So the kind of the My Animal Home setup like makes that, it works really well in that way, because it's basically like, it really just handles the distribution, and that's at this point kind of like most of what we would need on those older back catalog titles. So.
Were you gonna say something?
What's that?
Never mind. I guess to get a little off, not off topic, but sort of onto a different subject. I'm just gonna say, with my radio station that I work at, we don't really play a whole lot of Animal Collective, which is sad. I think there's a lot of great stuff we could be playing, and whenever I get if I get my own show, I'm definitely gonna be playing a bunch of Anco stuff. And
nice.
I guess so for people who don't really know the story about your new album and how it got released, could you sort of describe the timeline of that in sort of like a minute or less, maybe, like sort of like how your album kind of came to be, Sleep Cycle?
Yeah, it's the in some ways it's I know part of it's going to involve talking about the Kickstarter thing, which is definitely a big part of it. I mean, in some ways it's really separate from that, which is just that I've been wanting to. I mean, I have been writing and recording my own music like kind of independently from Animal Collective since I was like I said, when Noah and I were about 13, 14 years old, we started doing it, and I think when Animal Collective really started gaining speed, and my respect for kind of like what I felt like Noah and Dave could do, I kind of put my own. It sort of just made me put a lot of that stuff on the back burner. So I'd really been, but I've kind of been pushing myself to want to make a record on my own, or just start to really be able to get songs on my own out for a long time. But I was having a hard time doing that. I think mostly for, I don't know, like I guess kind of psychological reasons more than anything. And then in 2009, I'd been on a break from the bands. They had done Merryweather without me, and they were finishing up touring, and I kind of had this opportunity to go. Our management at the time had sort of found this situation where the band Animal Collective and the band Gang Gang Dance could have gone to go play this festival in Africa called Festival in the Desert, which is like a very kind of famous festival around West African music. And so Dave, Noah, and Brian didn't want to do it because they were just finishing up Merryweather touring, and they were pretty kind of done and just didn't want to add any more shows. So sort of on a whim, my management offered to have me go along with Gang Gang Dance. And I kind of felt like it was this opportunity to push myself to do something that I think I'd kind of been avoiding in a weird way, or just kind of been like shying away from sort of committing to really doing it. It just seemed like kind of like a really perfect opportunity in a way. So I agreed to do it, and a Kickstarter campaign was started, and that initially was going to be me and Gang Gang Dance going to do that and sort of collaborating and all this stuff. And then like literally the day or two before the campaign went up, Gang Gang backed out, and I decided to keep going for it. And yeah, I mean, there's like a whole kind of controversy around what, people thought happened around that, but it was basically just that, at the time, the campaign went up, and I kind of hadn't really fully absorbed anything more than my own personal like movement to go. And when I sort of realized what was going on, the money that was being asked for, I kind of just decided it didn't really feel right. So I let all the backers know that I didn't want to use any of the money for anything of my own travels or anything like that, and figured out a organization in Mali that we could send the money to, and sort of gave people the option to continue to back the project with that new understanding, or to back out. And for the most part, everybody, decided to keep going for it, which was cool. And so we raised a bunch of money for this organization, and the product that was supposed to come out of it, to be honest, I didn't really have Sleep Cycle in mind at that point. I really just sort of had this drive to make music on my own, and I just figured I would kind of come back from that trip having put together a set of stuff and like sort of have something that I could put together. And I didn't really necessarily even conceive of it as like being something at the time that would be like my first solo record or anything like that. And there wasn't really anything about the way the campaign was set up that really even honestly sort of promised that. It really just sort of said that I would come back and send people kind of a collection of sounds and stuff that I recorded. I think there might have been some implication that it would be, some of my music and some music that I heard there. But that was really it. And I think when I came back, I think I felt this kind of weird combination of feeling like I'd really accomplished something that I was really psyched about, and felt the kind of beginnings of some songs that I was really psyched about, but I really didn't like the way any of it was sounding. And I felt really, I guess, kind of conflicted about sort of like how to approach it. I think that over the year, I guess it was about 6 years from the time I got back from that trip to when the record came out, I think it was a slow build of me just really kind of confronting the same thing that I'd sort of been confronting for, 20 years at that point, which was just sort of like really trying to find a way to record music and sing my own songs that felt, personal to me and felt like something that I really, could stand behind. And so it was a long process. It was a long process for the backers that had been waiting for it. But in a way, it kind of ended up being, I guess, kind of a meditation on like that, not so much the process in terms of the Kickstarter thing, but I think just like the sort of the creative process and the kind of personal process. Not even necessarily related to like creativity, but just being a human being and just sort of, I don't know, confronting sort of like fear and ideas of kind of like self-value and all those kinds of things. So I don't know, that's longer than a minute, but that sort of sums up some of it for you at least.
Yeah. I guess that was going to kind of lead in what you're talking about, having sort of self-doubt, I guess. That sort of leads to this question of, producing for yourself. Because, I know from, doing, some video editing of videos of myself or, audio editing of myself, I really just do not like listening to myself. It's like I can only do it for a certain amount of time till I get like, okay, I do not want to do this. But making music, of yourself and having to listen to yourself and all the stuff you make, how much of a struggle, or generally how is it kind of producing for yourself compared to like Animal Collective or Avi or et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I have really mixed feelings about it. I mean, yeah, I mean it's weird because I love producing stuff, and yeah, I've gotten to work on like working on Down There for Dave was like awesome. I fucking love doing that. Him and I also worked on a record for our friends who goes, we put records out by before called Tickly Feather, which is actually a record that we're still trying to get out, but I really love that, like stuff with Animal Collective that I've kind of been behind the controls with. I really love kind of producing and engineering stuff. It's really fun for me, and I think that when you're doing stuff on your own, or when I'm doing stuff on my own, I think I kind of have like I like kind of like a conflicted feeling about it. Like on the one hand, I'm really specific and I'm really perfectionist, and I really enjoy the process. So I think I really want to be in the position of being, really in control of like every aspect of it, from tracking to mixing and everything in between. And it's really hard for me to kind of let go of stuff to other people. When I do let go, sometimes it ends up being that like they'll make decisions that are not, what I want, and then there's sort of conflict, and I almost just would rather do it myself. But there's definitely another side to it where it's really, I think as I've been kind of like finding finding my legs, I guess, a little bit. Early on, it was really brutal. Like I just didn't, I think having that kind of thing you're talking about, where just hearing my own voice made me feel bummed. It's really hard to like, mix something when like that's all you can hear. So it actually was really helpful for me to kind of have some experiences like working with some other people in those kind of situations. I guess the kind of first notable one in a way was working on Centipede Hurts. I wrote the track Wide Eyed, and when we worked on that song in the studio with Ben Allen, I think it was kind of like the first time that I'd really been in a position of really working on something that I felt like was mine, but with having somebody else that could just take over the technical side of it, so I wasn't having to look at levels and make sure things like sounded right, but also have someone who kind of could sort of help focus like what I was doing or how I was doing it, and give a certain amount of like feedback or encouragement that helped me kind of see it from different perspectives. And so that really helped. And then on, for Sleep Cycle, there was two of the tracks, though I guess sort of the fourth and sixth track, but like the last two songs really, Footy and Good House, were tracks that I went and recorded in the studio in Brooklyn with this guy Nicholas Fernhest, who we've worked with a bunch in the past, going all the way back to he kind of like very briefly helped kind of like put the final touches on Campfire songs, even though we had done most of it. But that and Here Comes the Indian was really like he recorded that, and ended up doing some stuff down the road. So that was sort of another step of just sort of being able to be in a studio with somebody else and sort of be able to keep all my attention on like my own kind of like mental state, I guess, and my own sort of like perspective on the music, and not have to on top of that be distracted by worrying about mic placement or levels or does this sound, just like being able to have somebody else give feedback. And so I definitely really appreciated that. And I think that as now that Sleep Cycle's out and sort of even working through finishing up that project and starting to work on newer stuff, there's sort of I think I'm in a place where on the one hand, like part of me, it still really feels like there's a benefit to like working with other people, but I also feel like a little bit less of like the conflicts that I think I was feeling leading up to finishing that. So it feels a little bit easier to kind of like do all of it myself. I really like that process of just being alone with like recording gear and instruments and just really getting in your own headspace and not having to think about something else being there. So it's kind of just depends, I guess, on the situation. And I think I value both a lot, but they definitely are really different for sure. There's no question. So.
And how do you know? Actually,
another long-winded answer. Sorry.
Again, I can edit it down again, because with these 5-minute shows, it's like it's 5 minutes, so I have to do. It's not like a raw interview. It's editing and all this stuff.
All right, cool. Well, sorry. Yeah. Still sorry to drone on.
It's totally fine, man. Let's see. Actually, how did you end up picking up musical engineering? When did you learn that that stuff?
I really just learned it from. Like I said, when we were starting 13 years old, I think getting like a Tascam 488 or Noah got one. I think that was that was the beginning of it, was just sort of understanding that you could have a medium that you could put multiple tracks on, and that you had control over sort of how those things sounded, both going into it and on the other end, by just simply EQing or something. So it started off really early like that, and then I think that I had an interest in that stuff like before Animal Collective existed. That and then, like I said, when I was like 17, 18, now, and I kind of got like some upgraded to like some nicer, bigger mixers, and got like an ADAT and some nicer microphones, and kind of had some basic ideas of sort of just like the recording a guitar in a bathroom sounded different than recording a guitar outside or whatever. And I think that it started with that, and then once Animal Collective really started working in studios with other people, and I guess Nicholas, who I was talking about being kind of like the first person we really were in like a proper studio with, I just always found myself looking over the shoulders of whoever we were working with and just seeing what they were doing, and really paying attention like just through the process of recording. And so I got software, kind of like probably going back to 2003 was maybe the first time I got like a DAW. I think it was an early version of Logic, or maybe it was Cubase. I don't really remember. I just would, every time we're in the studio, whether we're working with Nicholas or Scott Colburn or Ben Allen or whoever, I'm always looking over their shoulder. And the more I've done it, now I'm at a point where, not that I still have a ton to learn, but I feel like I'm very, very versed at this point in like what goes into making a record and all the different elements. So yeah, I love it. It's definitely like something I love a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we can go back to your album real quick, because I just want to talk. I mean, your album, I really love it. Like, it's just, it really, it kind of came out of nowhere, really, because I didn't really hear about the Kickstarter stuff, because I just got into like Animal Collective around like last year, because I had friends who were really into them, and I was just like, whatever, Animal Collective, whatever, I'll check them out whenever I feel like it. But
Yeah.
so I kind of. So it's kind of nice to be able to miss out on that sort of like Kickstarter thing. So I'm not coming in with like super high expectations about your album, because people have been waiting for 6
or
years.
low expectations. It's hard to tell what people's expectations were. I think I don't know. I set it up kind of weird, I guess. But yeah, I understand what you're
saying. Mm-hmm. And so listening to the album, it's just it's so good. You have all these these influences that play with the album, and different sounds and whatnot, and what were sort of, did you have like any sort of musical influences or sort of like general influences that were at play when you were, writing and recording the album?
It's always like a weird question for an answer. I mean, definitely. Like it would be insulting for me to say that I don't have influences. But I think the way that I think about influences is like it's very rarely like a direct thing where I'm like, I think for, and I'm not even saying this like from some sort of like I think this is like extra cool or something. It's just the way my head works. I don't necessarily like listen to something and go like, oh, I want to make something that kind of sounds like that, or like, oh, I like this little piece of that. Which is a really like totally standard and an appropriate way for people to make art. But I think that for me, there's a lot of stuff I listen to and a lot of stuff I'm influenced by, and I think when I'm working, it's just kind of like something feels right or it doesn't, and I very rarely kind of I'm sure there's tons of influences. I mean, I think. It would just be really hard for me to pinpoint any, because I just don't really feel like there's anything that I can, I think like for me it's more like things like like the first track on the record, that took a really big leap of, in general, Animal Collective is known for really dousing things and a lot of effects and really filling out, instrumentation a lot, and it, not really necessarily keeping things very minimal very often, and especially when it comes to the voice. And when I had been playing all those songs like live in 2010, and, I would drown my voice in effects because I just was so uncomfortable with the way that it sounded. And I think that for me, in a way, that was the last song I worked on for the record, was Gold Chords, and I just knew that there was something about like the idea of doing it really naked that felt important, I guess, for me to do, but it was really scary because the idea of my own naked voice didn't feel good. So I do remember like when I was kind of getting myself pumped to do it that way, I would listen to, I definitely put on tracks by more famous artists, a lot of classic stuff, like a lot of really old that just sort of had been recorded in a way where you can really hear the dirt and the mistakes in someone's voice, and realize that, I hope this doesn't sound like a weird, arrogant thing, but like I would listen to the Beatles a lot, because I think there's a lot of those tracks where you're just like, this is like one of the most like classic, and like my entire life I've been filled with these songs. And as a musician, I'm really used to being in a studio and really like nitpicking at sort of the quality of the way something sounds, down to the point of like, oh, there's a little like click there, like, oh, your voice is a little off, like re-record that. And I was just like, but then you listen to like, I can't think of a track off the top of my head, but you listen to whatever track and you're like, oh, John's like out of key, or like you can hear, like somebody like hit something like a little bit off, or like there's a hiss on this track, and it's like there's all these things that are actually really imperfect, quote unquote imperfect, in these tracks that are like considered some of like the greatest tracks in the world. So I think that's like a way that I would maybe like be able to identify influence, of just looking for examples that sort of inspired me or encouraged me to like try something that I was maybe like feeling shy about doing. But there wasn't a whole lot that I could say that, I don't know. I'm influenced by a ton of African music. I'm influenced by a ton of like pop and techno, and I'm influenced by a lot of classic. If you just, a lot of like a lot of what I would say is stuff that you've probably read 100 times if you read interviews with us. Tan and all that kind of stuff, and I think that all kind of like comes through. But there's not really a whole lot that I would say is like a direct like, I was thinking about this type of music, or I was thinking about that, whatever, when I did this track or whatever. It's kind of more of just like yeah, I don't know, some sort of a, just kind of all comes out, I guess, whatever feels right.
Mm-hmm. And I think we can wrap things up real quick with one last question, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry I'm giving you more than that sounds like right now.
It's like, because I expect this to be like a short little like 15-minute interview, and it's like, oh wow, 30 minutes. I should have realized that from like reading your AMA, because you gave like really nice like in-depth answers to like almost most of the questions, and it was like, because you answered my question because I was the guy who asked about like down there, and I was like, oh my
Right.
god, he gave this like really long in-depth answer that's really nice, and it's like, oh my god, he didn't have to do that, but he did it
Yeah,
anyways.
I think I can't help myself. People, I definitely had people like after that, like, who were like, man, you spent way more time on that than anybody that ever does AMAs ever does. Like, you're just, like, the dudes had done one, like, I don't know, maybe a month before that or something for painting with, and they were like, yeah, we were giving like, 2-sentence answers on everything. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't help it. So anyway.
I guess my last question would be sort of relating to my show's theme is surviving in the music industry. How do you think you survive in the music industry yourself?
I don't know how to really answer that question. I mean, I think that the sort of trajectory of Animal Collective has been something that I'm really proud of, and also sort of feel very blessed by. Like, I think as much as I credit us for being really hardworking, and I certainly love the music that we make, I also feel like we've been really, I don't want to say lucky, like, but I don't think I ever counted on like reaching the level of success that we've reached, and I certainly, and even then, I mean, me taking a break from the band, like I'm doing right now. I mean, I'm not, money definitely gets tight, and I work other jobs sometimes, or do whatever. So I don't know. I've never really. I mean, throughout the years when I haven't been working with Animal Collective, I'm usually figuring out other ways to like earn money if I can't do it through music, and don't really necessarily feel weird about that. So, I don't know, man. Yeah, the music industry is changing so much. I mean, even from, I guess we've been in it for kind of like about 16 years now, and it's just the way that profits work in the industry are just really different than they used to be. And I don't know if I've really figured it out yet. I kind of feel like, in a weird way, like putting the solo record out right now, and coming from where I'm coming from, I sort of feel like I'm starting off kind of pretty fresh in a weird way. I mean, not that Animal Collective isn't still clearly part of what I do, and I know that that carries a lot with it. But I don't know. I think I'm kind of figuring it out, and it feels very different to be doing it from this perspective. Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for doing for this. Thank you for doing this interview with me. Thank you for doing this interview with me, man.
Yeah, no worries. I hope that my rambling, confused, whatever is editable enough to be sound like something half intelligent.
Oh, good. I'm gonna be here like at the radio station all night working on this, so I can definitely make something out of your ramblings, I guess.
All right, cool. All right, man. Well, yeah, thanks for talking, and I hope it comes together. All right.
Yep. All right. See you, man.
Yep. Take care.